Hi, I'm Mike Cohen, and welcome back to the Oakland County Child Killer. So, in the past episodes, we talked about the four kids that were abducted, held for days, and then found dead. So, quick, there was Mark Stebbins, age 12, held for 4 days, found dead on the side of a road with signs of sexual abuse. The next victim was Joe Robinson, age 12, held for 4 days, no signs of sexual abuse. But according to the book, The Snow Killings, they said that there was a slightly used tampon with her. And at that time, her mother said, she hasn't started her menstrual cycling yet. So that's a little odd fact. She was found murdered 4 days later with a shotgun blast to the face. Also, Mark Stebbins was found suffocated. The next victim, Christine Mihalik, age 10, held for 19 days and then was found dead on the side of a road with signs of sexual abuse inconclusive because there was some conflicting reports on her autopsy. More people said no. One guy said yes, but he's also known to be a fuck up on a lot of cases if you look into this. And then the fourth and final victim, Timothy King, was abducted, held for 6 days, and then found murdered on the side of the road. And there he was also suffocated. So Mark, Christine, and Timmy were all found suffocated, with Mark and Tim showing signs of sexual abuse, and he was found on the side of the road as well. So we've gone over the victims, and last episode, right before Tim King, I went into two people that were mentioned, and this episode we're going to talk about them, but there are going to be years jumped between. So the first suspect we're going to talk about is the background of Greene, who was about 27 at the time. And if you look at him, he does really look like the sketch that was made during the abduction of Tim King. And he was first picked up on January 25th, 4 days after Christine was found, on a sexual misconduct charge that was unrelated. So here's some facts about Greene. So Greene was born in Michigan, but ended up in California for a while. And during his time in California, he got quite the rap sheet, but we'll talk about the main part of what he got. While he was in California, he had 50 counts of sexual misconduct with minors, which is basically molesting little boys. He was also a little league coach, and how he got caught out there, and you can listen to what happened because it seems very striking to what's going on now in the 70s here. There was a boy, he molested him or tried to molest him. He ended up choking him out to the point where he thought he killed him. He they talk about cigarette burns. He tried to burn him with a cigarette on his stomach. He didn't respond. He picked him up. He dumped him at an emergency room at a hospital, left him on the lawn, and then called the hospital from a payphone, hey, there's a kid in your lawn. He then gets picked up. So he's got 50 counts now. They really go on him. There's 50 people coming up saying that he did stuff to him in sexual misconduct. This fucking guy gets 1 year in a mental institution in 1974, 75, okay? So once he does this rehabilitation thing, the state of California puts him on probation and ships him back to Michigan. Now, in his interrogation, he tries to screw with the time that he came back, but he was back probably around late January, early February, back in Michigan. And he checked into his probation officer. I think he had a certain amount of time in March. Now, when they picked Greg up on that other sexual misconduct charge in Michigan, he rolled on Chris Greene about the murder of Mark Stebbins. So now we got a guy who says, yeah, I know who killed that kid, right? Was Greene involved? That's for you to decide, but chances are, yeah, 100% yes. So they don't know if he's in jail or not after, because he's got to post bond. So there's a paper that says he was in jail. There's a paper that says he wasn't in jail. And his sentencing is until March 30th of 1977, and then he's sentenced to life in prison in June of 1977. So there's some things with Greg Greene right there. So like this guy later, so now we're going to shoot, like I said, we're going to jump 1977. Now we're in 2000s. This is not known to the public, but later on we find a little bit more about Greg Greene. Greg Greene, he wrote his brother a letter. His brother threw it out, and he was also found that he had a hidden room in his house that he admitted to his brother that he would use that room to hold him and a boy so he could do things with them. And this room was so hidden, his brother even said the people that own that house now probably do not even know that room is there. It was behind a panel, and when you opened it, it was large enough to keep about 2 people in with tile and carpeting. Police discovered this room and heard about it in 2007, but there's never a search warrant to go to this residence and look for this room. Now, that's a big indicator, and I did mention that I thought Jill might have been held at that room, and there is a carpet in there, and there are carpet fibers on these kids' socks. So this is Greg Greene, and like I said, he's a suspect that they had that nobody even knew about until about 2007 when something happens at some polygrapher meeting. So this is Greg Greene. This is suspect number 1 that they had in custody in 1977, 4 days after Christine Mihalik went missing, or was found, 4 days after she was found. You know, so Timmy King isn't missing yet. And now we'll go over the other suspect. And this one, there's a lot with him. So there's Chris Busch. They pull in on January 28th, 1977. During his investigation, they find a lot of things out about Chris Busch, who owns a restaurant, who is the son of a CFO at GM. So this is where the money comes in. And in the snow killing books, I read that the task force, while in the years of 78 and to 1980, we're talking about a guy who we don't need to look for the killer. We believe he's institutionalized. The family did the right thing, put him away. We don't think he's going to be out to killing. We don't see any reason to pursue it or push it. So they're like hinting on that this guy or one of the persons of interest is from a rich family. When you read that in between the lines of the book, they're kind of almost squealing on themselves. So now we're going to go into Chris Busch. Now, Chris Busch came back from Europe in 1976, around the time Mark Stebbins goes missing, but he tries to lie about the date, but I think it was a day before or 2 days before Mark Stebbins goes missing. So this is probably around the time Greg Greene and Chris Busch become partners. I wouldn't say they're friends. And also, I also find it odd that if Greg Greene and Chris Busch are doing this, he just rolled on Chris, but their sickness is so deep, they don't care if they're rolling on each other or not. They're still going out to get kids. And there's more people that you find out years later because they said they had no suspects, yet tip 369 and 370, Chris Busch, Greg Greene, and their cars and names come up during a lot of this investigation with each kid. Okay, so Chris Busch is around 25, 26 at the time. He's the son of H. Lee Busch, the CFO of GM. He has 2 brothers, and things get a little crazy. So while they picked him up, it's said that Greg Greene and Chris Busch in 1977 passed their polygraphs and wrote cleared on the paper. This turns out to be false 30 plus years later, that they both failed those polygraphs. Now we're sitting here thinking they were let go because they passed their polygraphs. Now going in more into Chris Busch. Chris Busch gets in trouble for more sexual misconduct later on, and one is involving a girl. And it said that during the questioning of that, he's like, I don't really do girls, but you might run into a problem during my polygraph with some other shit I did in the past. That's an indicator. What kind of shit did you do? So they sit there, and now he's around the end of 77 and beginning of 78. This Chris Busch guy is being looked at. They're investigating him, but they are not letting the public know because he has that rich family. Interesting. So at this point, we're going to 1978. And Greg Greene's away for life for sexual misconduct. So this guy's not a problem, but he was definitely involved in this shit. If you look at his background and the things that he was doing, yeah, they should really have looked into that room. I don't know if at that point, once it was learned through things that room was there, if that family's like, we need to get rid of this room, that's haunted or whatever. But they never made a search warrant or even looked into that room during any of this investigation where it should have been. So, Chris Busch, he's taking polygraphs. He's on multiple counts of sexual misconduct with children in 4 different counties. During his interrogation, he mentions 3. Now, this is right after Christine Mihalik. 3 of the locations where he likes to pick up kids are the 3 locations where the kids were picked up. Then, he was also found to be sexually abusing his nephew, who lived near another guy we'll talk about, who's key in things, Vince Gunnels. So, his nephew said that while they were out one day, he was at the pharmacy, and he points out to a nephew, yeah, that's where they picked up the Tim King boy. Oh, how do you know where this kid was picked up? That's interesting. So anyway, we're going to go through it. He's kind of really being watched. But like I said, the public doesn't know there's any suspects, but they're watching him. November 20th, 1978. Chris Busch commits suicide, supposedly. There's so much involved. But remember what I said in the snow killing books. This guy's like away in the mental ward and he can't hurt anybody. I think that was a promise made by the Busch family. We're going to handle that. And that's where my theory comes in. So now, Chris Busch is found dead, and even cops that were there were just like, this suicide scene does not seem right at all. But anyway, let's talk about right before they found it. So apparently the maid went to the house and couldn't get into it. So she calls his brother, Charles. And Charles doesn't go, oh, yeah, hey, all right, well, maybe no one's home. Let's go figure it out. Or, because the newspapers are piling up. Let me go see what's going on. I can get in there. He's one of their sons. I'm fairly sure that he has a key to the house. No, his first initial reaction is, got to call the police. So he calls the police, they get into the house, and that's when they find Christopher Busch. Now, there's things about Christopher Busch that as you go deeper into it, there are so many things wrong with this. But during this, they find ropes. They find, a picture of Mark Stebbins. It's not a physical picture, but it looks like it was sketched out that looks exactly like him and the last thing that he was wearing, and it looks like he's moaning in pain, pinned on his wall. There was a suitcase found when they first interrogated him in January of 1977. I think they found other stuff at the residence, and they go through it, and here's some things that are wrong with the suicide. So there's a shotgun. Oh, wait, there was a shotgun involved in Jill's murder. What? Oh, okay. So the way that it looks like he got shot, when you do it, you either put it in your mouth or you try to go up. It looks like he got shot from the top of the head. The other fishy thing about it is that Chris was kind of wrapped in a blanket. So how did he really get to do this? And the other thing about Chris's scene is that a medical examiner finds out his blood alcohol is 0.41. 0.41. This guy's going to die of alcohol poisoning. Now, also during that, they could have taken more evidence. Apparently, there was he had a high blood alcohol level, but there's an empty liquor bottle. We're not looking to see if DNA wasn't really a thing, but not something taken into consideration. And they take the shotgun. Now, during this time, apparently his father, I think, was in Europe. And he comes back and he's like, doesn't be like, oh, my son's dead or anything. He goes and he wants the gun back. Hey, can I get that shotgun you guys found at the scene? Oh, okay, that's great, thanks. Oh, here's a paper I'll sign. I'm going to bring it back. And that gun never shows up again. That's interesting. So that thing I read in the snow killing book, this guy's institutionalized, and they start putting this stuff out around the time they're looking at Chris Busch, around the time he's dead. No, he's not institutionalized. Someone paid to have this guy fucking whacked. And there's other theories with his death, that he might have been the weak link. So with these people that were involved, and someone is obviously being protected here, they had him taken out. because he might have been ready to squeal on this whole operation of them taking kids and doing things, and then the murders, and there could have been some important people involved. And that's where I slightly tie in that Fox Island that I mentioned in the introduction. Like, I don't think it's too tight. And yes, Chris Busch was found at Fox Island. He was someone who went there, and his father's pretty high up from a wealthy family, very well known. So, think about all that. And none of this is released in 1977. His suicide is talked about, but none of this is released in 77 and 78. It's not found out about anything with Chris Busch until like 2007, 30 years later. And you're like, what? Because, think about it. Money. Now, during also this, so Greg and Chris are up for similar charges. Chris gets probation in 4 counties. Greg gets life in prison. Their bonds were set different. They were both set at $700. I think it was $75,000 or $750,000. On Greg's, everything comes out normal. On Chris's, it's scribbled out, and someone manually writes 1,000 on it. Also on Chris Busch's file, after he talked about how he fantasized about taking kids, how he would want to hold them for days, how he owns a restaurant, the Scotsman. Someone would work days, someone would work nights, so there was always someone with the children. When asked what he would do with them after, he couldn't answer. He fails the polygraph, even though someone was paid to say he passed. Greg Greene failed his too and let go. They're sitting there, wow, some of the good cops on this are like, yo, we got the guy. Yeah, you got the guy because you're a real detective and you know what the fuck's going on. Anybody who had those 2 guys, even a rookie on a case, would sit there and listen to this guy and be like, he just named all the areas. He just says he's a pedophile. He just said he fantasizes about holding boys or kids in general for a long period of time. He comes from a rich family. He owns a restaurant, which means he doesn't have to show up for work for days if he doesn't want to. He's the owner. His family bought it for him. And there were just questions I'd like to know. Did Greg Greene work at this restaurant with him, which would have given him access to choose any shift he wanted? At the bowling alley, were people questioned and showed a picture of Chris Busch and Greg Greene? Of course not, because it wasn't revealed to the public then. It was found out later by one of Timothy King's childhood friends who was a polygrapher at a fucking conference. Another polygrapher fucks up, and he wasn't supposed to say anything, and he fights tooth and nail about everything and makes things very hard, that he mentions, yeah, I know who killed your friend. And then, apparently when you listen to this part, he's like, whoa, what? Stumbling, because he knows he fucked up. He wasn't supposed to say anything because it's a client privilege thing. But he had to say something, so he just gives him one little clue. The client and the attorney are both dead. So we have a guy who also during, because I guess, you learn about that they had pre-screening polygraphs with a lawyer. So then if it went well, they would use that in court to try to get a better deal. Which also, going back to deals, on Chris Busch's file, I don't know if I said it, because I said, this case is a mess. It gets confusing. There's fuck-ups everywhere. There's hidden shit. And I said, the answers to everything is right in front of you. We just got to have somebody admit it. So, it says on his thing, no deals. Whoever, they say the name of the guy who does all this, no deals. And then later it's written in handwriting that here's his bail, here's this, and they give him this deal. But they were getting on to Chris, and they were looking into him heavily after Timothy King. Especially probably because they put the pieces together. Hey, wait a minute. We let this guy go, and another kid's missing. Huh, interesting. That falls on the fucking police department on that. And these cops, there's a lot of them. There could be crookedness. I learned in other podcasts, there was a cop hiding out Arch Sloan, which when we get into the 2000s, they're going to be under suspects. There's hairs found to a gentleman named Vince Gunnels, who you kind of feel bad for because he was abused by Chris Busch and probably forced to dump Christine's body, so he's not really questioned for murder, but he might know things, and he doesn't say anything because we know Greg Greene and fucking Chris Busch are fucking scumbags, and they fucking killed these kids and abducted them and did God knows what to them. It's fucking bullshit. So even at the point, if they're even dead and they get convicted, at least the families have that peace. Like, yo, all right, these are the fucking guys. But then that's going to make the police look like a bunch of assholes because you had these guys and a fourth kid goes missing. You didn't follow leads by cops that were like, yo, I don't think that's the car. For both Christine and for fucking Timmy. And the thing is that these guys are not smart. You might hear in like the Hulu special, one of the cop goes, these guys were, real smart. They were fucking, no, they weren't fucking smart. The only thing they did was they got so many counties involved that nobody could communicate properly, or egos were coming in like, I'm going to be the one to crack the case. Fuck them, And then you got the Michigan State Police, and the FBI was in it for a little bit, but by the time the FBI got into it, I mean, Timmy King was already dead. That whole first thing with Chris Busch, they might, because it said cleared on it, during those polygraphs, they were, oh, these guys are cleared, whatever, and wasn't looked into at the time. So it's odd also that after Chris Busch commits suicide, like around December 15th, a letter goes out to all of the fucking victims' families that they're sorry they couldn't find anybody, there was no suspects, and then you read in the Snow Killings that there's these snippets in the mail from the in the magazines from the task force that, oh, the killer, we couldn't find him, or, maybe the family felt bad and he's institutionalized. He must have come from a very well-off, well-known family that wanted to protect their name. Like, you're literally telling them, yo, we know what happened, but we know it's not going to happen anymore. Well, yeah, because fucking Greg Greene is in jail for fucking life, and fucking Chris Busch was fucking committed suicide, aka it was a fucking hit, whether it was his family who committed the hit, or it was other higher up pedophiles that were known that like, yo, we can't have this shit blow up on us, we're going to get fucked over. Someone had a hit on that guy. And the fact that his dad went in looking for the gun, took the gun, and it never came back, and that suitcase that was found disappeared, you kind of put the pieces together like, oh, wow. And you know what? Ever since the two of them are gone, there have been no more child killings. There were no long period abductions in that area because the case was fucking solved. We just need the conviction. And that's why I'm doing this. Because you got to look into this. You got to do your reading. You got to do research. It's a fucking nightmare. The more you go in, the deeper you go in, you realize that the names are already in the box, but nobody wants to say anything for numerous reasons. I mean, at this point, I don't know why the Busch family would even be protected, or half these people. Half of them are dead or so fucking old they don't even know their name. But there is a big mistake. If all this shit's found out, the fucking King family, that lawsuit is going to be huge. You had these fucking guys, you let them go, and our kid gets fucking taken, sexually assaulted, and killed? Fuck you. And the shit they did to Timmy's father throughout that whole thing is fucking heartbreaking. And you'll find out more about that as you dig. Barry King, he really was a trooper. And then you find out things later, you'll realize that, like, the Mihalik family went to a psychic and he said some shit, and like the next day they go to the police department and there it is, the file about Chris Busch and Greg Greene, and a suitcase and ropes and all this shit. And maybe people just want to know what the fuck happened to these kids. We know the treatment wasn't good. We got 2 boys that are sexually molested. We got 1 girl that's fucking shot in the face down the road. And then we got 1 girl who was held for 19 fucking days. Like, just this involves kids. If this shit was happening now, this would not be dragged out on it. And I understand that back then technology wasn't the same. I mean, everything's different now. You can catch somebody doing something with your doorbell ring system. Cameras everywhere, Cell phones. You can get up like someone gets taken. You can be on the phone with the cop. I understand there's a technology difference, but you have this case solved and it needs to just be closed because the evidence, they all, and the people and everything that's said and done, this is more than enough. Nowadays, if that Chris Busch guy said all that shit then, he'd be in a fucking courtroom and he'd probably be convicted of it. The fact that he just admitted to all that shit and names these areas. So like I said, this whole thing is just to bring awareness to people, anybody I can, just to get this case like seriously looked at, because they leave it as an open case so they don't have to talk about it. And like I said, I came to the conclusion very quickly after digging, this case is solved. We just need someone to talk about it so they can close it. And like I said, there's so many police fuck-ups. If all this shit's proven, then yeah, it's big mistakes on MSP, Michigan State Police, and so but here's the thing. There should be no reason why they don't push on the guys that are still alive that have been linked to some involvement. Arch Sloan, Ted Lamborghini, we're going to talk about them. And Vince Gunnels, though he's not one of the murderers or even suspected as one, there was a hair found on him on Christine Mihalich's body. Okay? And you know what? That kind of ties it in because that ties him in with Chris Busch. Because sometimes questions you'll run across are, were the girls taken by someone else, you know? No, they were all taken by the same person. And I think they took Jill and Christine by mistake. And why they kept Christine so long, like I said, there was a lot of coverage on that, but it's just weird why they kept her almost 3 weeks and Timmy 6 days. And he ended up getting dumped outside of Oakland County, which put a whole new county into this at the end. The task force is going crazy. So just think about that. You know, just go through all that. Like, you have this fucking guy, both of them. They're both away. Well, one's away and one dies. Also, there's other things about Greg Greene. So Greg Greene died in 95 in prison. And apparently there was a confession made to his cellmate where he said, I was involved and I got away with killing 4 kids. And that cellmate went and said something, you know, after. But, like, he admitted it. And you know what? Even though it's coming from a cellmate and maybe it's not, you know, it's not going to be taken seriously. Yeah, he fucking killed those kids. There's no doubt in my mind. Chris Busch and Greg Greene are suspect number 1 in this whole thing. The other people that are involved, we're going to learn about them later. I mean, yes, 2 of them are in prison for life, and the deals that were offered to them and they wouldn't talk about it are fucking unreal. You don't even hear deals. Any inmate that was offered these deals to talk would have fucking taken it. They are unheard of, you know? So it's just about asking the questions, and I'm just going to bring it to the OJ trial. Now, people look at me weird when I sit there and I go, I don't think OJ Simpson killed Nicole Brown. I might be one of the only people that think that, but he knows who did. Because the mischarged. He definitely hired a hitman to get that done because he was in Chicago so fast. But not to go off on a different thing, this is it. Like, here we go. And if you just dig deep, listen to other podcasts, read books, watch Children of the Snow, listen to, like, you know, Forever Children, and you know they know, that's the name of the podcast, you'll realize this case is fucking solved. Just someone has to come out and say it. So on the next episode, I'm going to talk about Arch Sloan, Ted Lamborghini, and Vince Gunnels, and the years will be between 2005. Also, Chris Busch and Greg Greene will come up in there, and the search warrants and stuff. So that'll be from 2005 till this case kind of went silent again around 2018, 2019. But it's still an open investigation, which gives them the excuse, we can't talk about it, it's an open investigation.